Welcome to the Williams Services Group Contractors Safety Induction. This program is the essential first step in our partnership and is designed to ensure that every individual working on our sites understands their role in maintaining a secure environment. Our corporate head office in Western Australia. This foundational base is strategically complemented by a crucial second office established in South Australia. Our group of companies include Williams Electrical Service, Williams Fuel Systems, Williams Hire Services, ODF Electrical, and Task Digital Control Systems. In addition to Williams Services Group of companies' obligations to ensure health and safety as main service provider and person conducting a business, the following minimum work, safety, and health requirements apply to any contract work undertaken directly or indirectly for our customers. All contractors are required to accept and formally acknowledge their obligation to comply with these conditions before work can proceed by completing the Contractor Acknowledgement Statement at the end of this induction. In signing this document, the contractor and its workers acknowledges and agrees that it is responsible for ensuring that it and any workers or subcontractors engaged to perform the works comply with the requirements set out in this induction and any required safety documentation. Safety compliance is the non-negotiable adherence to governmental statutes. Legal requirements. The Williams Group of companies requires that all contractors and their workers, including subcontractors and employees, take all suitable precautions to protect the health and safety of all persons who may be affected by the work directly or indirectly, including the contractor's employees, subcontractors, the group's workers, and/or members of the public. The contractor and its workers, including subcontractors and employees, must comply with all relevant safety legislation, standards, and codes of practice, be alert and observant while on site, consider their surroundings, including people nearby or who may be impacted by the business that the contractor is undertaking, use protective clothing, plant, and equipment properly, follow the instructions of site safety representatives, maintain the work area in a tidy and safe manner. Leave the work area in a safe, tidy, and secure condition. Adopt a positive attitude to safe working. Be alert to changing or unusual conditions, and provide appropriate barriers, screens, and site security measures extra to protect all people and property from any hazards generated from the works and prevent any exposure to risk. On any job site, prioritizing safety means actively engaging with your work and never hesitating to clarify uncertainties. If you're unsure about a task, a piece of equipment, a procedure, or potential hazards, it's absolutely critical to ask questions. National Licensing Standard. All operators of plant and equipment must hold and be able to produce a valid license issued under the relevant legislation, codes of practice, or standards. For example, all load-shifting equipment, forklifts, crane, hoist, and pressure equipment operators. Also, scaffolding, dogging and rigging work require operators to be licensed under the national standard for licensing persons performing high-risk work. Certificates of competency and trade qualifications. All operators of plant and equipment must hold and be able to produce a valid certificate of competency issued under the relevant legislation, codes of practice, or Australian standards. Any plant that is not subject to the national licensing standard must be operated by persons with the required level of competency and accredited training. Traffic management. The contractor must comply with and meet all requirements outlined within the State Road Traffic Management for work on roads code of practice. Working under or near power lines. All work under or near power lines is to be carried out strictly in accordance with the Code of Practice for Personnel Electrical Safety for Vegetation Control Work, near-live power lines issued by the Energy Safety Department of your state and requirements for maintaining clearance from power lines. Details of the specific requirements are available from the respective agency. Confined space entry. Before entry to a confined space is permitted, the contractor must ensure that all the appropriate isolation procedures are carried out as required by the relevant Australian standard, safe working in a confined space, and the work health and safety regulations. A confined space is defined as an enclosed or partially enclosed space that is at atmospheric pressure during occupancy. is not intended or designed primarily as a place of work and has restricted entry and exit that either has or is likely to have an atmosphere which contains potentially harmful levels of contaminant or unsafe oxygen levels, or is likely to be of a nature that could contribute to a person in the space being overwhelmed by an unsafe atmosphere or contaminant. Plant and vehicles. Plant and equipment operators shall possess all necessary training, licenses, registrations, and/or certificates of competency in accordance with all statutory requirements and qualify them as competent operators of that plant or equipment. The contractor is responsible for ensuring that operators are assessed as competent in the use of such plant and equipment, and shall keep a register of operator licenses, competency assessments, and certification. Mobile cranes. Owned or leased by contractors shall carry the current logbook and manufacturer's operation and maintenance manual as at all times. Details of maintenance history and modifications shall be entered in the plant logbook, and where possible, the same operator will operate the same crane on site. Once a crane is set up on site, the working radius will be barricaded as required and signposted to identify that only those involved in the lift are to enter the area and no other trades are to work in the barricaded area whilst the lift is in progress. Loads shall be secured whilst the crane is in motion and where the operator's vision is restricted. The operator shall travel in reverse and/or be guided by a dogger or rigger. A certified rigger or dogger shall direct all crane lifts or load movements. All lifting gear shall be removed from the crane hook prior to travelling on the site roads. Front-end loaders, shovel, backhoes, and the like shall not be used to suspend loads as a crane. Where a crane is left unattended, the boom shall be positioned so that it does not project over or lie in the direction of existing plant. No load shall be left suspended unless the crane operator is inside the crane cab. Working at heights. All working at heights tasks must be conducted in accordance with the health and safety regulations and applicable Australian standard. Industrial fall arrest systems and devices selection, use, and maintenance must comply. Residual current devices. The contractor must provide a working and tested portable residual current device, RCD, when the building is not fitted with such devices. Welding and cutting. The contractor must ensure that all work requiring the use of welding, gas cutting, grinding, or naked flames is done in accordance with WorkSafe technical notes and guidance notes. All permits, fire watch personnel, flammable material, screening, and protective equipment must comply with the requirements within the Work Health and Safety Regulation. Working alone. Where the contractor's workers or subcontractors are working alone, the contractor must ensure compliance with the Work Health and Safety Regulations, including having a process for regular communication. Contract documentation and communication. Each project or works will have a Williams Services Group of companies project officer. All queries in relation to the project or works and changes must be directed through the project officer. Site-specific induction. Before arrival on site for the first time, the contractor will be escorted to the work location by the project officer. The contractor is responsible for ensuring that its workers and subcontractors are made aware of the site plans and requirements, including, but not limited to, the requirements set out within this document, applicable health and safety plans, policies and procedures, what to do in case of emergency evacuation, the location of first aid and emergency washdown facilities, and how to report damage, loss, and personal injury and/or near misses. Insurance. The contract conditions set out the required insurance types and limits. Prior to commencing any work, the contractor must have the required level of cover with proof in the form of certificates of currency. Working with children check. A working with children check is a compulsory national criminal record check for certain people who engage in child-related work in Australia. If the contractor or any workers or subcontractors, volunteers, or students on work placement, paid or unpaid, are engaged in child-related work, or if the usual duties of their role involve children or contact with a child, then the employees may require a working with children's check prior to commencement of any activity. The contractor acknowledges and agrees that it will ensure that all workers have the required checks to perform their roles. Audits are a requirement to demonstrate compliance. The Williams Services Group of companies may conduct and/or require the contractor to engage an independent third party to conduct periodic inspections of the contractor's work sites. The contractor must ensure that its workers and subcontractors cooperate with the Williams Services Group of companies in the execution of these inspections. If the group identifies that the contractor has departed from the minimum requirements set out within this documented information, the contractor must take necessary steps to ensure compliance. Identified departures from the minimum requirements will be recorded in writing on the contractor non-compliance notice form and must be signed by the contractor's appointed representative. Rectification of stop work orders. All workers have the right and responsibility to stop work in the event of imminent danger to the health and safety of workers or other persons. The Williams Services Group of companies may request an immediate stop to work if an unsafe work practice is detected, and work shall not recommence until the contractor has sufficiently demonstrated that the unsafe practice has been rectified. If the Williams Services Group of companies becomes concerned that the contractor and/or any of its workers or subcontractors have failed to comply with the conditions outlined in this document, the project officer may require that the contractor implements corrective measures, including setting out steps to ensure that the breach does not recur, which is a failure to adequately address the breaches. A proof of written communication, such as pre-start toolbox, will also be required to ensure everyone is aware and familiar with the stop for safety was enforced. High-risk activities. Tools and templates for managing high-risk construction work. The Williams Services Group of companies recognizes that high-risk construction work must be managed according to best industry practice. Construction work is fully defined under the work health and safety regulations and includes excavation, demolition, piling, pipelaying, roadworks, and earthworks. Safe Work Method Statement SWMS. Construction projects require a site-specific Safe Work Method Statement SWMS plan. To identify and manage the inherent risks in construction work, the contractor will be required to prepare a SWMS, where the type of work meets the definition of high risk or is deemed required by the project manager and its customers. Job Safety Analysis JSA, also known as Job Hazard Analysis, JHA, Risk Assessments, or Take 5s. The contractor, including its workers and subcontractors, must adequately perform and document site and job-specific risk assessments to identify hazards and develop and implement appropriate measures to mitigate hazards to safeguard its workers and members of the public. Where contract project work is not rated as high risk, a Job Safety Analysis, JSA, also known as a Job Hazard Analysis, JHA, shall be the minimum requirement. A template for the JSA or JHA can be obtained from Williams Services Group of Companies Health and Safety Department. A job task JSA, a JHA, which is work and site specific, must be completed by the contractor, signed by all workers and subcontractors, and approved by the contractor's designated supervisor prior to any work being performed. The level of detail recorded must be appropriate to the degree of risk identified. The JSA or JHA should identify all potential risks such as slipping, reaching, vehicle movements on site, potential exposure to heat or cold, repetitive actions and so on, and should identify the methodology that the contractor or subcontractors intend to use to carry out the activity, the additional risks arising from that methodology, the relevant control measures to reduce those risks, including how the control measures are to be implemented, and how the effectiveness of the control measures will be regularly monitored and reviewed. Site movement control. Equipment and material deliveries. Prior to making any arrangements, contractors are to inform the project officer of proposed plans for delivery, offloading, and safe storage of equipment and material on site. Barricades and fencing. To ensure the safety of all persons on the work site or who may be affected by the works, the contractor must supply and erect any necessary barricades and fencing appropriate to the work they are doing. All materials, equipment, plant, and tools must also be safely stored within barricades, fencing, and traffic management control as required. Particular care must be taken to check and secure the barricades and fences whenever contract staff leave the work area. Housekeeping and waste disposal. The contractor, including any workers and subcontractors, are responsible for the safe disposal of all waste resulting from the works and all associated charges for supply and emptying of bins on site. The contractor must ensure that sufficient bins are provided to dispose of all waste material and that bins are promptly emptied to avoid waste material accumulating. High-risk waste such as asbestos, paints, chemicals, and contaminated soils disposal in Australia requires strict adherence to a comprehensive framework of national, state, and local regulations designed to protect human health and the environment. This typically involves classification of the waste, specialized handling procedures including secure packaging and labeling, and transportation by licensed contractors to approved waste management facilities. Code of conduct. Harassment and discrimination. Discrimination, bullying and harassment are unacceptable. The contractor must ensure that its workers and subcontractors comply at all times with all laws regarding harassment and discrimination. Practical jokes. Practical jokes and skylarking are strictly prohibited at all Williams Services Group of companies and all customer sites. Alcohol and other drugs. The contractor must ensure that workers who are under the influence of alcohol or drugs are not permitted to attend the workplace. Any person suspected of being under the influence of drugs or alcohol will be directed to leave the site immediately under the supervision of the contractor. All workers are subject to drug and alcohol testing at the request of the Williams Services Group of companies HSE manager and/or project officer. Contact with members of the public. The contractor must ensure that its workers and subcontractors conduct themselves professionally and in accordance with applicable legislation at all times when at or near a work site or performing work for the Williams Services Group of companies. Any contact with members of the public must be courteous and generally should be kept to a minimum. Contractor employees and subcontractors must avoid any altercations and/or adversarial exchanges with members of the public. Nail guns and explosive tools. The use of nail guns and explosive tools is covered under the work health and safety regulations. The contractor, including any workers or subcontractors, must ensure that as far as is reasonably practicable, the site is sufficiently controlled to prevent members of the public entering the site when nail guns or explosive-powered tools are being used. Personal protective equipment, PPE. Personal protective equipment, PPE, comprises of clothing and safety equipment that a worker wears to minimize contact with and exposure to occupational hazards. All workers must wear appropriate PPE to enable them to work safely. It is the responsibility of the contractors and subcontractors to ensure that all workers have access to and use the correct PPE to carry out the work in a safe manner. All workers must comply with Australian standard. If adequate PPE is not used, workers will be required to cease all work until the correct equipment is obtained. Sun ultraviolet protection. A broad-brimmed hat, long-sleeve shirt, long pants, and appropriate closed-in shoes with safety boots where necessary shall be worn for outdoor work. The contractor must ensure that SPF 30+ at minimum broad-spectrum sunscreen is available for all workers. First aid, fire, and emergency procedures. Muster points. The project officer will identify emergency mustering points during the site induction. A roll call of those present must be completed at each mustering point. Workers must not return to the site unless and until advised by the site warden or another authorized representative. Fire. In the event of fire, ensure the safety of people and immediately alert the emergency services. Persons on site should attempt to extinguish the fire only if safe to do so. The location of fire extinguishers, hydrants, and hose reels will be identified in the site induction. The contractor should note the location of these, the type of fire they are designed to fight, and their method of operation. Fire hoses must not be used for any other purposes. If a fire extinguisher is used, report it to the group project officer so that replacement can be arranged. First aid. Contractors must provide adequate first aid equipment and trained personnel. Emergency calls. In case of emergencies, the contractor must immediately contact DFES, police, or ambulance 000 and subsequently advise the Williams Services Group of Companies project officer as soon as possible. Accidents, incidents, and near misses. Accidents, even if not an emergency, incidents, and near misses, must be reported immediately to the project officer. The contractor and their workers acknowledges and agrees to cooperate with and follow any directions issued by the Williams Services Group of Companies, including but not limited to conducting prompt investigations and/or providing access to its workers, documents, and systems. Gases and chemicals. Gas cylinders. The contractor shall ensure that all gas cylinders are stored and secured in a safe place and condition, in the upright position away from heat, and fastened or secured to prevent them falling. Chemicals. The contractor shall keep on site and provide all employees and subcontractors with the appropriate safety data sheet, SDS, for each chemical to be used on site. The project officer shall also be provided with a copy of the safety data sheet, SDS. No chemicals shall be substituted without prior notification of the project officer. Manufacturers' labels are not to be removed from chemical containers, and unlabeled containers are not to be used to decant chemicals. Hazardous materials. Asbestos. Asbestos and mineral fibers license for removal. No asbestos or asbestos-containing substance shall be brought onto site. Existing asbestos-containing materials shall only be handled by qualified and licensed asbestos specialists. If you come into contact with these materials, stop work and report immediately. Silica. Silica shall not be used for abrasive blasting. Synthetic mineral fibers, glass fiber, rock wool, and ceramic fibers shall only be handled in accordance with National Code of Practice for the safe use of synthetic mineral fibers. Paint. Paints and polyurethane containing isocyanates, 2-pack must not be used on site without prior written approval from the project officer and adequate ventilation and mist controls in place. Isolation and tagging. The contractor is to isolate all equipment, switches, and controls required to ensure that the worksite is safe. The Williams Services Group of Companies requires contractors to implement isolation procedures for the use of danger tags, out-of-service tags, and lockout systems. Contractors must ensure that they and their workers and subcontractors use the systems in accordance with safe working and isolation procedures. Contractors shall provide their own danger, out-of-service tags, and lockout mechanisms. Electrical isolation. The contractor must ensure that isolation tags or locks are placed on all electrical switches, switchboards, and other appropriate switches, valves, main isolators, or key rings. Safety management and recording information. Williams Services Group of Companies has an easy-to-use contractor safety management software system, SiteDocs. SiteDocs makes it easy for contractors to ensure safety compliance across all sites we manage for our customers. For contractors and your employees, It's as simple as scanning a QR code or receiving a link from the project manager, and then filling out all required documentation and uploading insurances and licenses or certificates requested. No longer a reason for delayed information and paperwork. Workers can fill out forms such as risk assessments, upload swims, add photos, all support documentation. Review required resources such as safety data sheets and sign off on requirements. Documentation and signature requirement, all with built GPS and time-stamped data. Site Docs provides us with full visibility transparency and the ability to track contractors and workers' compliance. With this ability, we get safer sites, stronger audit performance, and minimized downtime and work stoppages, leading to greater profitability for all. It's important to remember starting safe. Staying safe means don't rush, don't get frustrated, don't work fatigued, don't be complacent. Keep your eyes on the task. Keep your mind on the task. Keep out of the line of fire. Keep your balance at traction or grip. Think practical safety. Reviewing what has been presented in this induction is in line with the legislation and the Williams Services Group of Company Golden Rules. The group's obligations has a duty of care to ensure safety and health of the contractors as outlined in the Act. Specifically, if the contractors are going to be exposed to hazards and risks associated with performing tasks on behalf of our business, we want to ensure safety first. The key strategies in managing our contractors' safety included effective documentation, aligning our contractors' safety plan with our safety plan, conducting contractors' safety orientation, and training, a degree of control of work activities to avoid injuries or incidents occurring, and conducting contract evaluations. Contractors also have their own duty of care while they are on site. The duty of care isn't only to their employees, but to everyone at the workplace, and contractors must ensure that no one's health or safety is put at risk by their work. Thank you for your participation in this safety presentation, and we look forward to working with you in the future.